How did this game hit a 250,000 Steam peak and retain over 100,000 daily peaks a full month after launch? Both of which are impressive feats for a live service game with a new IP. At a surface glance, the eye candy cannot be questioned, yet that is a cherry on top and a door opener. It is not enough to keep a game not only alive but thriving weeks after launch. As much as this game is blowing away expectations after finishing the story and getting to the hard mode colossi that are a large part of endgame, this is a pretty simple game in many ways. Level design is mostly corridors to kill rooms. There are only a handful of generally wave-based mission types that are repeated, and the grindy parts of the game are difficult to have any enjoyment from. Yet, it is easy to move around. The grapple and launch allows satisfying mobility. Many heroes even have their own mobility skills. On top of that, and this makes for a good combat pace, there are several playstyles based on hero abilities. Many different stats to focus on a build that can drastically change your focus between guns, abilities, or defenses. Bunny, for example, is earned very early. She moves quickly and restores her magic through moving. She has a super run ability that combines with an AoE electric attack that procs depending on how far she moves. This makes for a really good ability synergy. Compare that to Freyna. Her abilities drop pools of poison that can deal a lot of harm to clustered enemies or foes that don't move much. Abilities also have elemental types like frost or fire. The bosses often have weaknesses, as well as some abilities are very good for dealing with certain mechanics, such as dealing damage to a very common boss mechanic that spawns immunity shield balls that must be killed, or foes with various types of other shields. Aside from that, there's moderate gun variety, and gun control feels pretty good. In general, the combat of the game feels solid and is fun to engage in. On the other hand, the bloated currency system has hundreds of different things, each required to pick up the gear, heroes, and vital items. These will include things that let you recruit heroes, items that allow your heroes or guns equip more stat boosting mods, which are the key way to increase your power at max level, and other things such as reincarnation style system that makes a hero stronger with each reincarnation. That these things are complex and hard to follow is a bit unpleasant. That it is grindy is not so much an issue, since a game like this is going to have grind in an endgame. That only makes sense. Where it starts to hurt is that the grind has you in really painful, repetitive loops. As an example of this, I was looking to recruit Valby, one of the heroes, and to obtain one of the 4 necessary components to recruit her, there's a specific place it can drop. The mission with the drop generally has hero components between a 5 to 20% drop rate. However, you need shards to be able to even start the mission at all, and then to get enough you have to do another quest 3 times. But on top of the shards to start the mission, you need a key to open the chest at the end of the mission, and that key has a 20% drop rate from another mission, so you need to average 5 times on that mission. So at the most generous drop rate, you would need to do 5 runs of the final mission. To get 5 keys, you need 25 of the key mission. To get enough shards to do the final mission, 15 runs. So on average, at the most generous drop rate, you're looking at about 45 runs of the same mission. However, very few are that generous. That would be the most generous of missions. Consider if the reward and the key are both 5%, now you're looking at 20 finals, 60 shard runs, and 400 key missions. Add to that, the key missions often have 5-minute cooldowns before you can try again. Now imagine sitting in an area for 10 hours doing the exact same mission over and over. The specific nature of getting specific things you want is just straight up awful. There is some variety. Some keys, for example, are behind mid-length dungeons instead of short missions, and you have to fight a colossi instead, which are pretty fun fights, but you are stuck with the same problem. You are doing a very specific 2 to 3 missions or bosses dozens to potentially hundreds of times. That said, the game itself is pretty fun to play, but pretty awful to grind in, with a structure that funnels you into long, dull grinds. It is a very easy game to play and get into, has some solid challenge in the late game with fairly decent time to kill and survivability if you are up to date on gear and mods and know how to build, although it can become a huge slog if you continue to ignore gearing after hitting max level. Generally, it is straightforward. Dungeons and Colossi have rapid queues, although mission maps are built to expect 4-player teams to do the missions. Yet since there are multiple missions and other objectives, it is fairly easy to get maps where nobody is doing what you are doing, and it doesn't adjust. Doing missions with a group of 4 is a breeze, while doing of-level missions solo can be somewhat of a nightmare at times. Enemy variety is standard. There's many types of foes with different elements, speeds, defenses, often encountered in large waves, some melee and some ranged. Bosses will have telegraph mechanics that are usually decent to understand. However, the shield ball mechanic is grossly overused. Many foes will have shields that can be shot and a weak point to be put down, or large shield areas that can protect many foes but allow you to also enter and attack the foe or drop an AoE such as Freyna's poison pool underneath it. Usually, at a new phase start, bosses go invulnerable and several moving balls pop up above them. These can be pretty annoying to deal with. As long as the balls are active, the boss is invulnerable. The mechanic is used simply way too much. Colossi also have an invincible phase. Usually for them, the requirement is to hit a small, specific weak point to bring them out of the phase. In some cases, this works well. In other cases, it can make a boss somewhat miserable to fight. Regardless of whether it is fun or unfun fights, though, it must be restated again. This mechanic is used way too often. As for the visuals and story, the vistas are decent. There's some nice looking zones. The story and dialogues are just basic. Hero visuals, though, are peak. There are both some really cool armored up guys and some smoking hot babes, with plenty of cosmetics you can buy. The microtransaction system in the game is free to play. Whatever you think it is likely to be accurate. Most of your gear and mods are earnable in-game. Upgrading your mod capacity, however, requires a very grindy item. Or you can skip the grind and make the purchase. It is likely the main pay-to-win item, but it is a game that can be fully experienced without paying. This is a bit of Warframe, a bit of Destiny. First Descendant in the short term is a better game. However, the endgame so far feels a bit behind the other two. It doesn't quite have the depth or the amount of interesting things to do. There's quite a bit of repetition. That said, it is free. It has fun early game, and it has a large player base to ensure short queues. So if you are considering it, definitely give it a try.
The Architect Ruins. It took so many soldiers to find this place. Please let the Ironheart be in here somewhere.
I hope it is too, Bunny. I'd like to give Albion some good news.